So I, 27, female, was the maid of honor to my sister-in-law, Christina, 25, female, a couple of days ago. I've been married to her brother, Martin, 28, male, for about a year now, after 4 years of being together. Martin's family actually likes me, except for Christina. She has never taken a liking to me, and I've never been able to figure out why. I tried to be nice to her initially, but she was just so uptight and mean that I stopped trying. She reminded me of all the mean girls I've had to deal with in high school and college, and I knew better than to try to befriend her because I knew that that would never work. So she used to ignore me and I used to ignore her, and that's the way it was. Martin was upset about it and tried to get me to be her friend a couple of times, but when he realized that the efforts were not being reciprocated from her end, he didn't try anymore. And nobody else cared enough to force us together because it's not like we were kindergarten kids. So, to sum it up, Christina and I have never had a great relationship, and I never expected her to change either. It came as quite a shock to me when, a couple of months ago, she asked me to be her maid of honor. I wasn't really into the idea and told her that I needed some time to think, but eventually I was just going to turn it down. For starters, she and I barely even knew each other, and she'd made it very clear to me in the past that she didn't like me for whatever reason. Also, being a maid of honor was a duty and commitment that I didn't think I was ready to take on for Christina of all people. I was going to say no, but I did speak to Martin about it before I declined, and he told me that he actually believed that it would be a good idea for the both of us to spend some time together. And agreeing to be her maid of honor would be the perfect opportunity for us to do so. I was pretty reluctant, but Martin convinced me and said that if Christina had asked me to be her maid of honor, then that meant she was extending a hand of friendship towards me, and now it was up to me if I wanted to take that hand or not. So after a lot of deliberation, I decided to give it a shot, and I regretted it within a couple of weeks. She was pretty nice to me after I agreed to be her maid of honor, and it felt like a welcome change from her usually cold and gloomy behavior around me. We had a lot of fun planning and going out for brunch together, but then she asked me to buy her the wedding dress. It was a $3,500 dress, and even though it was pretty, I don't think it was necessary for her to buy a dress that she couldn't afford, especially after her mother had offered to let her wear the wedding dress she had worn for her own wedding and had even allowed her to get it altered to fit her better. She told me that she couldn't exactly afford the dress with her current salary, and it didn't fit in the wedding budget, but she had her mind set on that dress. She practically begged me to buy that for her because she knew that I had a much bigger income than hers. She told me that she couldn't tell her parents to buy it for her because they were already contributing to the wedding. She couldn't tell her fiancé because he didn't think it was necessary for her to go out of her way and buy a wedding dress when she already had one that her mom had allowed her to use. And it was a really beautiful dress, too. She could talk to Martin about it, which is what I suggested, but since I was her maid of honor, she thought that she'd ask me first because she knew that I earned more than he did, and it would be easier for me since I was the designated rich relative. For the record, I'm an investment banker, so yes, technically I do earn more than most of the people in her family, but there's also the fact that I'm not exactly her family. We're not related by blood, and I certainly don't think it's customary for the sister-in-law or even the maid of honor to buy the wedding dress for the bride. I tried to make up some excuses, but she was so insistent that I couldn't bring myself to say no, and I agreed to buy her that dress, as long as she paid me back the amount in full afterwards. Luckily, I had that conversation recorded on text where she agreed to pay back the amount, so now I can use that against her. I bought her the dress and she was thrilled. She was extremely nice to me, even more than she was to the other bridesmaids, who were her friends, and I felt great about it. It was a lovely couple of months until the day of the wedding when she finally went back to her old self in the worst way possible. Not only did she start behaving coldly towards me again, but this time she actually chose to make fun of me and humiliate me among her friends and other guests. The ceremony went well because there wasn't much talking involved in that anyway, but she had started distancing herself from me right from the morning of her wedding itself, and barely even spoke to me before the vows. Then, after that, while she was socializing with the guests and stuff, she dragged me along with her to meet everybody else. But then she only made mean jokes at my expense, which made them uncomfortable and made me feel awful about myself. She was ridiculously mean and made fun of everything, right from my appearance to my personality. She made fun of my weight, my nose, my social anxiety, and even the fact that I'm a bit of a perfectionist. It was crazy because it was completely unprompted and didn't make sense to me why she was doing that, especially after we had such a good run before her wedding, and I'd almost begun to believe that she was my friend. So I confronted her about it in person in a corner and asked her why exactly was she being so horrible to me all of a sudden. She laughed it off and said that I was just being silly and that she wasn't making fun of me, she was just introducing me to her guests. Even then, I told her that her way of introducing me was kind of mean and I didn't appreciate it. So she rolled her eyes at me and told me to stop being so sensitive about everything. She said that she wasn't being mean, this was just her sense of humor, and if I couldn't handle it, then I probably should not be friends with her, and walked away. I stood there for a while because I was shocked at the way she was behaving, and then I lost my temper and did something that I probably shouldn't have. I was only standing a little way off the stage and I could see that the band was still setting up, so the mics were not in use. And in the heat of the moment, I walked up onto the stage and delivered a speech that I kind of regret. Once I was on stage, I had everybody's attention, so I just started talking about how Christina had asked me to be her maid of honor a couple of months ago, and I'd said yes because my husband and I stupidly assumed that it would be a nice opportunity for us to finally get along. I mentioned that Christina had been quite cold to me before that, so I'd been looking forward to actually becoming friends with her. But unfortunately, Christina was also such a nasty B word that it was impossible to be friends with her even if one tried. Then I brought up how Christina had begged me to buy her the wedding dress that she currently had on, and then I said that judging by her behavior on that day, I think she'd only asked me to be her maid of honor so she could get that dress. And given that I was her highest earning relative, she probably had to suck it up and be nice to me for a couple of months just so she could have the dress that she wanted. I realized after a while that somebody had cut the power to the mic, so I started screaming out my speech instead, and I could see security trying to make their way through the crowd to get to me. People couldn't see it, but I still brought out my phone and showed everybody the texts, which I had screenshots of. I called her a tacky, ungrateful, and psychotic bridezilla, said that I was glad that I wasn't her friend, and then walked out of the venue myself before security could even touch me. I could hear her crying, and that brought me a great deal of satisfaction, so I didn't even look back and kept walking until I reached the bus stop that was closest to the venue. I didn't even check my phone until I was already on the bus that went home, and when I finally did, I realized that I had about 100 texts from my family. My parents had been invited to the wedding and had seen everything unfold. They wouldn't exactly be accusatory, but they did sound very confused in the text and told me to get back to them as soon as I could. Martin, on the other hand, had just sent me a couple of texts saying that what I'd done was insane and that we needed to talk once he was home. He also told me that after I left, Christina was pretty much inconsolable and everything had come to a halt for about 10 minutes while everybody tried to calm her down, and he said to me that I owed them all a huge apology. All the other texts were from irrelevant relatives of theirs who were only getting involved because they wanted to be a part of all the drama and gossip that would inevitably happen after this. I ignored all of it and headed straight back home, made myself a cocktail and ordered a burger since I didn't get to enjoy the wedding or eat, and then decided to have a fun afternoon to myself while watching television. I did not respond to a single call or text until the evening because I didn't think that it was important for me to talk to anybody, especially when I was in that state of mind. I felt insulted, humiliated, and used, but I also did regret the way I behaved because it was nothing short of psychotic. I had a lot of conflicting feelings, and I didn't think that I could talk to anybody or explain this at the time. The only people that I thought I did owe an explanation to were my parents, Martin, and my in-laws. Not Christina, though, because she knew exactly why this happened. Martin finally came back home at around 9, and he didn't even say anything to me when he entered the house. I waited for him to freshen up and get changed into comfortable clothes and assumed that he'd talk to me after that. But almost an hour passed and he still didn't come to me. So I decided to break the ice first and approached him. He was on his phone and stonily ignored me when I walked into the bedroom where he was lying down, but that wasn't going to stop me, so I did exactly what I did at the wedding and just started talking without overthinking it. I explained to him how Christina had been insulting me throughout the morning, and I even gave her a chance to apologize. Or at least just reassure me that she wasn't going to continue making fun of me like that just to get a few laughs from her guests because it was humiliating and I didn't like it. But she told me that I was making a big deal out of nothing, and that's what really pissed me off. Especially since I was the one who bought her that dress, even though I didn't have any compulsion to. And yet she couldn't even be a little grateful to me and was acting as if I was the one who was overreacting. That made me mad and I couldn't hold back, so I revealed that to all of her guests. So essentially, I just did what she was doing to me, but the only difference was that I had the mic and she didn't. I thought that this would be enough of an explanation for Martin, but he didn't say anything and continued to ignore me, so I snapped yet again and told him that he needed to talk to me. That's when he finally looked up at me and told me that he could understand that I felt humiliated, but that was still no reason for me to ruin her wedding day. Because it was not just an event for them and it reflected poorly on his entire family, and I hadn't even spared a second to think about him and his reputation among his friends and family before going ahead and screaming my head off at a public event just so I could get my petty revenge. He told me that my behavior was unacceptable and that my reaction to what Christina did was actually far worse than whatever she said. He told me that I could have dealt with the situation in a lot of better ways, but I chose to do the most unhinged thing. And after what I did, he couldn't just talk to me and treat me the same way unless I apologized to him and his family, especially Christina, because despite whatever she said, the fact that I ruined her wedding still stands. I thought it was ridiculous of him to expect that I'd apologize to Christina, because in my opinion, she was the reason behind this entire mess, and I just reacted to it. Granted, I might have taken things a little too far, but she was the one who started it, and it was crazy to me that he wasn't blaming her for anything. So we got into a fight over that, and I told him that I was not going to apologize to anybody apart from maybe him and his parents. There was no way that I was apologizing to Christina, and he could be mad at me if he wanted to, but that wasn't going to change my mind. He told me that I was acting crazy and unreasonable, and he could only talk to me once I decided that I'd be less irrational. It's been a couple of days now and we haven't spoken to each other, and I'm beginning to think that I might not exactly be in the right here. But I really just don't want to apologize to Christina, and even though I can apologize to Martin and his parents, I don't think I need to say the same for her because she was the one who screwed up first. She was downright horrible to me, and in my opinion, she completely deserved what I did, and I don't think that after that sort of disrespect, anybody would want to apologize to her. But as much as I hate to admit it, Martin also does have a point, and I could have dealt with it better, which I didn't because I was really angry. And now I just don't know how to feel about any of this. So AITA for delivering a really mean speech at my sister-in-law's wedding and making her cry? Update 1. Hey, so some of you have been asking me if Christina had reached out to me after the wedding debacle, and to answer that, no, she hadn't. and neither have my in-laws. Also, to make it clear, I really don't know why Christina doesn't like me because, contrary to popular belief, she and I had never met before I started dating Martin. So no, there was nothing from my past that could have led to such an intense dislike for me. And I genuinely have no clue as to why she hates me so much. I would also like to add that I wish nobody judged Martin and my in-laws just from what I said, because all of them are actually wonderful people and have always been great to me. We're going through a rough patch right now because of whatever happened at the wedding, but before this, all of them have always been lovely to me, especially Martin. And even now, Martin is just standing up for his family. I can't comment on whether what he's doing is right or wrong because I haven't made up my mind about that yet, but it's not like he is being cruel to me, and neither is he being hard on me. He's always been a wonderful partner, and just this one disagreement is not enough to break us. So please stop hoping, praying, and suggesting that I file for a divorce because that's definitely not going to happen. Thank you. Update 2. So it's been a week, a really difficult week too, since the wedding. Martin and I hadn't been on speaking terms for one whole week, and today I finally gave in because I do think that I messed up. And even if I didn't apologize to Christina, I did need to apologize to him. Because I ruined a family event that was a pretty big deal for them. After we were both back from work today, I decided to bring it up at dinner and told him how sorry I was for losing my mind at the wedding, and I also told him that I was going to talk to his parents and try to make things right with them as well, because they didn't deserve this. And I knew that their relatives were probably having a field day making fun of my meltdown at the wedding. But I also made it very clear that I still wasn't going to apologize to Christina because she was a horrible human being and I didn't want anything to do with her. He was quiet for a while, but then he told me that it was fine and that I didn't need to apologize to her. He was just really mad the other day, so he was being unfair and realized it much later. He just sounded exhausted and told me that it had been a really hard time for him because he was facing backlash from almost everybody in the family, and the only person he wanted to talk to about all of this was me. But I wasn't even talking to him, so it had been a pretty miserable week for him as well. He told me that his parents were furious at me, and he didn't think it was such a great idea for me to apologize to them right now, and advised me to let them cool off a little bit before I talked to them. He also said that he was really annoyed with his uncles and aunts and other relatives because they had nothing to do with this. But for whatever reason, they felt that it was their place to comment on me, and they called me really derogatory names in the family group text. He told me that he left that a while back, but his parents keep sending those texts to him to remind him how the family feels about me now, and apparently they want me to apologize to Christina and the rest of the family for my behavior. I'm honestly okay with apologizing to Martin and his family, but I am not apologizing to Christina under any circumstance whatsoever. What she did was not okay, and she's the one who owes me an apology first. I told Martin that I was ready to apologize to the family, even after whatever they called me, but I was not apologizing to his sister. To my surprise, he actually told me that I didn't need to apologize to anybody at all, because if this incident had taught him anything, it was that all these people cared about was their own selves. He called them all selfish and answered that he didn't think I needed to apologize to anybody because I wasn't answerable to them. He said that apparently he tried to tell his parents and the other members of his family that it was actually Christina who instigated and provoked me into doing that. But none of them were ready to believe it and just labeled me a psycho without even hearing my side of the story. They were sure that their little Christina was just incapable of being cruel to anybody. And so Martin knew that there was no point in trying to reason with them. He knew that they would just use the apology as a way to humiliate me even further, and he wasn't going to let that happen. He told me that he still stood by his initial stance and still believed that what I did was not okay, but neither was Christina as innocent as she was being made out to be. And so he told me that I shouldn't apologize to anybody, And even if I wanted to apologize to his parents for the sake of my own conscience, I should properly do it when they'd be feeling more receptive and open to it. Because if I do it now, then it'll be pretty pointless. So I guess it worked out pretty well for both of us. It's not perfect and it's not ideal, but at least I was able to get this off my conscience with Martin, and at the end of the day, what matters to me is what my husband thinks of me. Everybody else can just go to hell. Update 3. Hey everybody, I know a lot of you guys have been asking for an update, but to be honest, there's not a lot that has happened ever since the last one. I mean, after Martin and I made up, I pretty much stopped worrying about what his family thought of me. He got a promotion at his work, so we decided to take a little vacation because we were both really stressed, and that was about it. As for my own parents, I explained everything to them and they were okay with it. They weren't concerned because this doesn't have anything to do with them, and they're just glad that Martin and I are getting along and we made up soon after our fight. That's all they really care about. Neither Christina nor her parents have been in touch with me, and I honestly think that it's for the best. My in-laws were wonderful to me when I married into this family, but now I respect the fact that they're choosing their daughter's side over mine, even though she's in the wrong. It's their personal choice, and I'm not going to hold it against them. Update 4. So it's been a month since my last update, and today I received my money back from Christina, which was a pretty startling discovery because I'd almost forgotten about her and the wedding debacle. She also texted me because I hadn't blocked her, and I finally found out the real reason behind why she didn't like me, and it's just as stupid as I had expected it to be. Apparently one of her friends had a thing for Martin, and she was just about to set him up with her brother. But then he brought me home and introduced me to the family, and so her friend ended up getting heartbroken, and she blamed me for it, which is why she didn't like me. That friend of hers really liked Martin, and she'd liked him for a long time. But after our first year together, she realized that she'd never have a chance, so she moved out of state for work and is doing a lot better now, from what I've heard. I don't know how any of this is my fault, but I guess with Christina, she just needed a reason to dislike me, and she picked that. I would have much rather not found out the reason at all, now that I know that it's something this dumb. I told Martin about it, and he told me that he always had a clue, but he could never see that friend of hers as anything more than his little sister's best friend. So even if I hadn't been in the picture, they still wouldn't have gotten together. But whatever. At least it's all over now, and I don't have to talk to Christina ever again. Stay tuned for more stories from our girl relationships.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick? Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations, Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. "All right, everyone's presentations are done." "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me. "There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer." He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. "Still here?" Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. "I'm leaving." I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick! What's wrong?" Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. "Probably Sam." Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. "Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized." Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. "All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason." "What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do." "I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please." Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, "Yes. That's Nick for you." Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, "I'm very sorry." Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, "Get his boss here immediately." It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. "What is that idiot doing?" "All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next." Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. "If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you." I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. "Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize." Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. "What kind of training are you giving your subordinates?" Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed, I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry." Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." "Mike, what have you done?" Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part." I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hope to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.